It was late at night and I was on my 5th consecutive shift at the hospital when a neighbor's call shook me to the core. She criticized me. Drive. Scott, can you and your wife keep your voice down when you are doing the deed with your wife? My children are still living in our house. This has been going on for 5 straight nights. She continued, when I knock on your door, you both act like you're not home. Are you doing this on purpose? Then she added, your wife is paralyzed, but you're still having sex. Are you a beast? The hand that had been writing the medical record froze and my whole body turned cold. 5 days I hadn't been home at all during these 5 days. As soon as my colleague arrived to take over, I rushed to change into my civilian clothes and then headed. I called Jill Ackmond, my wife, but no matter how many times I dialed, she didn't answer. Even more strangely, our housekeeper, Margaret Lockwood, who usually never missed a call, was unreachable too. An uncontrollable sense of unease gnawed at me and subconsciously my foot pressed harder on the gas. Jill and I had always had a strong, loving relationship. She would never betray me. Besides, she was paralyzed from the waist down, so it was impossible she did that. However, Margaret was different. Jill mentioned that she had been taking personal calls with a person she had an ambiguous relationship with during work hours. She repeatedly refused to listen to my advice. I had considered replacing her for a long time, but I hadn't found a suitable alternative. How dare she bring a man to my house? The more I thought about it, the angrier I was. I sped up at 128 kilometers per hour all the way home. When I entered the password, my hand trembled so much that I had to do it 3 times before I could finally open the door. The house was pitch black, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Jill. Margaret. I called out repeatedly, but no one answered. An ominous feeling settled in my chest as I fumbled to turn on the lights. However, all I saw was Jill lying on the floor while Margaret was nowhere to be seen. Jill's hair and face were wet and there was a red mark circling her wrists. Rage overtook me and I almost lost my mind. How dare Margaret kidnap Jill just to satisfy her own selfish reason? She was too much. Jill raised her head and her tear-filled eyes locked onto mine. Honey, why are you home? Her voice was hoarse and it broke my heart. How long had she been crying? I lifted her gently and carried her to the bed. Then I held her close while stroking her hair. I'm sorry, my love. I came back too late. You've suffered so much, I said. Then I added, if the neighbors hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known what's been happening here. Hearing my words, Jill stiffened. She pulled away from my arms. What did the neighbors say? She asked. Her nervous gaze made my heart ache even more. Dearest, Margaret has been bringing a man here for 5 days. Has been holding you captive like this the whole time. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Did she threaten you? I asked. Jill exhaled a sigh of relief and leaned back into my arms. Honey, you're so busy saving lives at the hospital, I didn't want to burden you, she said. Then she added, moreover, the man she brought with her is tall, strong, and fierce. I'm afraid that something will happen if you have a conflict. As I listened to her soft sobbing, I blamed myself even more. My wife had to endure so much hardship alone at home to avoid disrupting my work. At the same time, my hatred toward Margaret became even stronger. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. But before I could press the call button, Jill snatched it from. She gripped my hand tightly. She looked pleadingly at me. Hubby, don't do this. If you call the police, it's going to be known by everyone. When I looked at her begging me, my heart became even more uncomfortable. Jill's lower body had been paralyzed for years, and despite the specialized medication and the rehabilitation sessions I supervised, her condition had shown no improvement. To cover her expensive treatments, I had to work tirelessly, leaving less and less time to spend with her. I had watched her grow more withdrawn and sensitive to escape being stared judgmentally by others. She was not willing to enter the outside world for several months and even refused to go to the hospital for checkups. I was so useless, I could not make a lot of money or make. Suddenly there was a bang downstairs. A car alarm blared outside, followed by angry shouts from several men outside. I instinctively moved toward the window, but Jill grabbed my hand and pulled me back. Don't go, she whispered, burying her face in my chest. I'm scared. Just stay here with me. I immediately went back and wrapped her in my arms. Once again, nothing mattered more than Jill. I hugged her and lay on the bed. Jill tilted her head up and kissed me gently. The time passed by, and eventually she fell asleep in my arms. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. Filling a basin with cold water, I submerged myself in it. I had never shared true marital intimacy with Jill. I had to endure my passion in the ice-cold water. Just like today, this was another form of happiness for me. Yet tonight, the bathroom reeked a strange, putrid smell, oozing a putrid, acrid stench that gave me a headache. After rummaging for a long time, I finally pinpointed the source from the trash can. It turned out the culprit was a pair of red woman's underwear. My emotion that originally had calmed down was ignited with anger. Once more, what Margaret had done was over the top. Early the next morning, I threw the underwear out. After I wiped Jill's body and changed her diaper as usual, I was ready to leave for work. Today, Jill acted very abnormal. She was reluctant to let me leave. Hubby, what time will you be home tonight? She was afraid of affecting my work, so she was rarely acting like this. It looked like she still felt shaken from yesterday's ordeal. So I hurriedly petted her head lovingly. I promised her, as soon as my shift ends, I'll come home to make your favorite coconut chicken. Despite her reluctance, I had to go downstairs. Her special medication supply was dwindling and I needed to find extra income for my side gigs to cover the cost. As I drove out of our neighborhood, my phone rang. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. Before I could speak, she lashed out at me. Dr. Scott, did you make a report that I was fooling around at your house? How could I work in this industry if you accuse me so falsely? You'd better take good care of your wife if you have this time. Don't let you be a fool after you've helped raise others' child. I have not made my move yet, but she had the audacity to look at me. However, what did her statement mean? After her rant, she immediately hung up the phone. And she ignored every message that I sent her. An uneasiness gnawed at my heart. I asked for a leave and headed home. The moment I entered the garage, I noticed my parking space was occupied. After several attempts to call them, a burly and tall man with a plaster cast on his leg hobbled toward me. He was out of breath and there were a few small love bites on his neck. I recognized this man. He often took my parking space. I complained a few times, but he gave me a hard stare in return and drove off without even saying sorry. I was in an awful state of mind after having 2 bad problems in just one morning. Only when I returned home and saw Jill's sleeping face did I gradually calm down. When I stroked her hair gently, inadvertently, I saw a faint lipstick smudge on the corner of her mouth. I did not recall applying makeup on her this morning. My unease deepened as my gaze drifted to her legs. Over the years, I had grown accustomed to her legs' atrophy despite the rigorous therapy and medication. However, surprisingly, I realized that her legs looked firm, just like they were before the accident. She suddenly woke up and looked at me and there was uneasiness in her eyes. "Darling, why did you suddenly come back?" she asked. "Is there something wrong with my legs?" I hurriedly shook. "Oh, nothing. I was just worried because I forgot your morning message. I wanted to check." She smiled and pinched my nose, but then suddenly lowered her head. Tears falling in big streams. "I'm so sorry for being such a burden, hubby. My paraplegic's condition makes you constantly worry so much for me, and this makes you so tired." Usually, her vulnerability made my heart ache and I would immediately take her in my arms and say how much I loved her. However, Margaret's words, "the strange man in a cast," and all that had happened today made me feel very uneasy. Was it possible? Could Jill's paralysis have healed a long time ago? An overwhelming urge to uncover the truth came over me. I grabbed a towel that I used to wipe, purposely soaked it in boiling water and dabbed her legs with it while feigning routine care. The hot towel immediately turned her legs crimson red. I sneaked a look at her, but her expression remained unchanged and she looked at me with a smile. I immediately came to my senses and really regretted my impulsive behavior. What was I thinking? Jill loved me so much, but by suspecting her of hurting me, I really deserved to die. After panicking and rummaging to find the medicine, I trembled as I helped her wipe the water off. Looking at the bulging blisters, an overwhelming sense of guilt eroded my heart. I lowered my head and I could not hold back my tears. "I'm sorry, Jill. This is all my fault." Jill stopped for a moment. She struggled to lift her upper body with her hand and hugged my head into her arms. "It's okay, hubby. It's not like I can feel my legs anyway. It doesn't matter." She pulled a box of milk out of the drawer, stuck a straw in it and handed it to me. "Honey, you've been so tired lately," she said. "It'll help you to relax by drinking milk. After this, have a good sleep for a while." Her kindness made me happy. I gulped down the milk, but immediately noticed the bitter aftertaste. My heart went cold as a doctor. I knew perfectly well that it was the taste of a sleeping pill. Jill was still looking at me, dead in the face. I did not know how she put it. In all I knew at that moment, she needed me to fall asleep immediately. So in order to know what her plan was, I decided to follow her scheme. After excusing myself to go to the bathroom, I vomited all the milk out of my throat and then collapsed on the bed in a daze. Jill cautiously came over and shook her hand repeatedly in front of my face. After she believed that I was already dead asleep, she snorted coldly. "Pathetic lapdog." I squinted my eyes and watched with my own eyes as my paralyzed wife stood up effortlessly. I held my breath, pretending the sleeping pill had worked as intended, every muscle in my body limp except for the cold fire burning behind my closed eyes as I lay on the bed like a corpse, forcing myself not to twitch when I heard the sound of the blanket shift. Jill moved slowly at first, the soft creak of the mattress signaling she was sitting up. I expected the familiar thump of her sliding her legs over the edge, her upper body doing the work her lower body never could, only that sound never came. Instead, I heard the soft pad of bare feet on the wooden floor. Feet. Moving. Walking. My ears burned with the betrayal I was witnessing in silence, and when I dared crack one eye the smallest bit, there she was, my wife, Jill, the woman I had bathed, carried, changed and sacrificed my life for, standing. Not wobbling, not struggling, standing tall and walking toward the full-length mirror by the dresser like she was checking her makeup before a party. I almost stopped breathing as I watched her pull her long hair into a loose bun and lean closer to inspect her face, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a tissue and letting out a small laugh, cold and satisfied. 5 years, she muttered under her breath, and he never once suspected. The door creaked open and Margaret stepped in, followed by the man I'd seen earlier, now without the cast. He strolled in like he owned the place, wearing the same smug expression I remembered when he used to steal my parking spot and glare like I was the inconvenience. "So," he said, flopping onto the couch like a frat boy, "how much longer do we have to keep this act going?" Jill rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed. "Just until the paperwork clears. He's got insurance, investments, and that apartment he doesn't think I know about. If I pull the grief widow routine right, it's all mine." Margaret chimed in as she poured herself a glass of wine. "We've dragged it out long enough, haven't we? You could have been free of this noble doctor months ago." "I wanted to make sure," Jill said, crossing her arms. "He's too smart to go down easy. If I didn't drug him, he'd start asking questions." They laughed. I stayed still. My nails dug into the mattress beneath me. My heartbeat pounded in my throat so loud I was terrified they'd hear it. Jill walked back to the bed and stood just inches from me, staring down at my face. Her expression twisted into a look I'd never seen before, pure disgust. "You should have died in med school," she whispered, then snorted. "Always working, always saving the world. But never enough for me." She turned around, sauntered back to the other man and sat on his lap, kissing his neck. "We'll do it after tomorrow. I'll say I found him unresponsive. The neighbors already think I'm pitiful. They'll eat it up." Margaret raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." I stayed there, paralyzed in a different way now, not by injury but by betrayal, heartbreak, and a growing sense of something sharper, something surgical. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to fight now. I was going to cut this rot out of my life completely. I just had to make sure every single one of them paid. I stayed completely still, every breath measured, every muscle pretending to be drugged and useless while inside I was screaming, my pulse thundering in my ears as the 3 people I once welcomed into my home talked casually about how to kill me like they were planning a dinner party, their voices low and conspiratorial but clear enough in the silence of the room to make every word stick in my memory like a needle in my brain. Jill sat comfortably on that bastard's lap, one arm looped lazily around his neck while the other hand reached for the glass of wine Margaret had just poured, her face lit with a twisted calm, no longer the fragile, weeping wife I had carried up the stairs, washed with warm towels, and held through nights of hopelessness, but a calculating monster whose body had betrayed me even before her words had. "We'll do it tomorrow night," she said, swishing the wine in her glass. "I'll give him double the dose this time. Maybe even lace it with something stronger. Just enough to mess up his breathing. You know how weak he gets when he's sleep deprived." Margaret, ever the loyal vulture, nodded and replied, "I've got access to some things from my brother's pharmacy. Non-traceable. I'll bring it in the morning." The man, Darren, I think she called him, laughed, rubbing her thigh. "You were cold, babe. I love it. What are you going to say when they find him?" Jill smirked and shrugged, already rehearsed. "He came home early. Wasn't feeling well. I gave him his meds, he went to bed, and I woke up and found him gone. The grieving widow who fought for years to save her husband." She tilted her head mockingly. "I might even cry at the press conference." The press conference. As if the whole thing were just a PR stunt. I wanted to leap up, to grab one of them by the throat and scream, "I'm right here, you heartless freaks." But I didn't move. I listened. I let them talk. I needed every word. Every single word. "You are sure his accounts are still in your name?" Margaret asked. "After all these years, he didn't change it?" Jill scoffed. "He's too noble for that. Always believed in trust, in partnership. Even when I started getting worse, he said everything was still ours. Like a damn saint. He has no prenup, no will. When he dies, it all comes to me by default. And then, once I'm legally free." She looked at Darren. He grinned. "We vanish?" "Exactly." Jill leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "Let them mourn their beloved Dr. Scott. Meanwhile, I'll be on a beach in Bali with a new last name." I memorized that line. Every syllable. Every breathy word. I felt bile rise in my throat, not just from betrayal, but from the sheer indifference. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. It was extermination. And I was the insect. Jill finished her wine and stood up, stretching like she'd just finished a workout. "All right, get out of here. I need to wipe his mouth and reset the room so it looks like he just fell asleep naturally." Darren stood, kissed her neck, and said, "You sure he's out cold?" Jill walked over to me, my pulse stopped. She leaned down, brushed my hair back with surprising gentleness, and whispered, "Sleep tight, love. Tomorrow, you'll finally rest." Her fingers slid under my chin, checking my pulse. My skin crawled, but I kept my breath slow, shallow. After a moment, she turned to Margaret. "Still got it," she said with a wink. "He believes everything I say." They all laughed. Then they left the room, one by one, leaving me alone in the darkness, alive, but already being mourned in advance. And I knew in that moment, as surely as I knew how to restart a stopped heart, that I would not die in this bed. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. No, I would bury them all with the truth they were too arrogant to hide properly. I just needed to wait. And when I rose, it wouldn't be to beg. It would be to expose. To destroy. To survive on my own terms. The moment the door clicked shut and their footsteps faded down the hallway, I opened my eyes, sat up slowly, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for the past hour. I could still feel the shape of her fingers against my pulse point, the same fingers that once stroked my hair at night and now checked if I was weak enough to die without a fight. My entire body trembled, not from fear, but from a focused, precise fury. I moved silently, the way I'd been trained in med school emergency drills when every step and sound could mean life or death, and slipped into the bathroom. Behind the mirror, taped behind the cleaning supplies where no one ever bothered to check, was my old personal phone, deactivated but still functional with offline storage, and I immediately powered it on, turned off every connection, and launched the voice recorder. I played back the last hour. Crystal clear. Jill's voice mocking my trust, Darren's laugh, Margaret's detailed contribution. Everything. I copied the file and sent it, along with a message, to only one person, my old roommate from residency, Alan DeWitt, now a detective with cyber crimes, someone who owed me more than one life-saving favor and had promised, "If you ever need something, anything, I've got you." I added a note, "Play these if I disappear. I'm not suicidal. I'm being hunted by my wife." Then I went to the corner of the bedroom, pulled up the floorboard behind the wardrobe, where I'd hidden the backup drive from our old baby monitor system. Jill thought it had been dead for years, but I'd quietly reactivated it during one of her physical therapy sessions I'd scheduled away from home. The wireless nanny cam embedded in the bookshelf still recorded everything with audio. I copied the last few days, including that moment when Jill stood up out of her wheelchair, Margaret laughing as she recounted how easily I bought her tearful act, and Darren in a towel pouring wine into her mouth like a honeymoon groom. I encrypted it, compressed it, and uploaded it to a cloud service Alan and I used during med school for shared confidential cases. Then I sent him a second message. "Here's the visual. Tell no one." The adrenaline made my fingers shake, but my mind was sharp. Next, I scrawled a short note on our stationery pad in the kitchen. "To whoever finds me, I'm sorry. I tried." The kind of vague despair that would sell the story Jill was so desperate to tell. Then I took a small dose of the sedative she'd been slipping into my drinks, just enough to dull my senses and slow my responses but not enough to knock me unconscious. I wanted my body to respond as if I were fading, not dead. Jill would come back in the morning to check on me and find me collapsed in the basement, where I had crawled down using the hidden side stairs, dragging a heavy storage bin across the floor and letting my body slump over it. My pulse would be slow, my breath shallow. Exactly what she expected. I clutched the towel she used to wrap around me during our care sessions, let it absorb the sweat and artificial fatigue. She'd assume the drug worked too well, maybe even believe I was at the edge of death. She'd panic, call Margaret, and if I was lucky, they'd come in person, thinking they'd finish the job. What they wouldn't know is that the house was now fully monitored. Before staging my collapse, I used the remote app to re-enable the front camera's motion sensors, and I rigged a second phone, my old work device, into a live streaming device tucked into a flower vase facing the main hallway. Everything would be recorded, sent straight to a secondary server Alan set up for whistleblower investigations. I wasn't just gathering proof. I was baiting them into exposing themselves on every level. Before the drug kicked in fully, I laid down in the cold basement, curled my body in a half-fetal position, and let my face go slack. I heard footsteps upstairs. Jill's voice. "Let's check on my poor husband," she said sweetly. Her shadow passed over the vent near the floor. I closed my eyes, slowed my breath, and waited to hear what the mask would say next, because tomorrow, the world would see her for who she really was. I must have drifted in and out of a lucid haze for what felt like hours, my heart a ticking bomb beneath my ribs as I lay slumped beside the plastic storage bin in the basement, letting the sedative dull my limbs just enough to keep my breathing slow, uneven, and my body slack like a broken doll. But my mind never let go of the plan, not even when I heard the front door creak open and footsteps clicked across the hardwood floor above me, deliberate and light. Jill's voice followed, pitched perfectly in soft alarm. "Honey?" she called, fake concern dripping from her lips like syrup. "Scott?" I didn't move. I couldn't. Not yet. I heard her walk slowly to the kitchen, then toward the basement door. "Scott, are you down there?" she asked again, just loud enough to be heard by Margaret, who must have been waiting on the porch or behind her. I heard a key turn in the lock. Another pair of shoes joined hers. "Do it now before he wakes up," Margaret whispered. "We dump the body, say it was a collapse, natural causes. He's been stressed, exhausted, no one will question it." Jill let out a small, trembling sigh. "He looks awful. The pills are wearing off. Do we need another dose?" "No, just move fast," Margaret hissed. I could feel their presence now, one standing above me, the other rummaging through something nearby. Jill's voice came next, colder, sharper. "All that work, all that caregiving, and he still almost caught me. Men are so predictable." They didn't know that every word was being recorded, every whisper transmitted through the hidden phone streaming everything to Alan's secure server. My finger twitched slightly, but I didn't open my eyes. "Let them bury themselves." Jill crouched down beside me and tapped my cheek. "Still breathing," she muttered. "Barely." "That's enough," Margaret said. "Help me roll him into the tarp." I felt their hands on me, cold, calculating. I let my head roll limp to the side. But then, something changed. A sharp voice echoed from upstairs. "Police. Don't move." The sound of boots on the floorboards above. Jill froze. Margaret dropped my arm with a gasp. "What the hell?" Jill started, but her words were cut off by the rush of officers storming down the stairs, guns drawn, flashlights slicing through the basement gloom. "Hands where I can see them. Step away from the body," shouted a familiar voice, Alan's. I opened my eyes, slowly, deliberately, and met Jill's stunned, horrified expression. "Surprise," I said, my voice hoarse. "I wasn't thirsty for milk last night." Her face went white. You were awake?" "For all of it. The rest happened fast." Officers cuffed Jill and Margaret where they stood, reciting charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, abuse of a vulnerable adult. Darren was found hours later trying to flee the state in Jill's second car, which she'd registered under a fake name. He didn't make it past the gas station. They got him too. All three were arrested. The evidence was airtight: recordings, video surveillance, timestamps, emails, phone calls, and the confession Jill stupidly offered while stroking my hair with poison in her pocket. Cold, calculated betrayal broadcast to the world. The story exploded across the media. Doctor's wife fakes paralysis, plots husband's murder. I didn't grant interviews. I didn't respond to press. I let the facts speak. Alan handled most of it. I just watched from a hospital bed where they ran a detox and stress panel on me, asked if I wanted a therapist. I told them maybe later. Right now, I just needed silence. Peace. Jill tried to reach me once. A letter. Scribbled in shaky handwriting, begging, bargaining, blaming the drugs, the pressure, the depression. I didn't open it. I filed it with the court. She wasn't remorseful. She was exposed. And now, she was finished. I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand. No alimony. No contest. No contact. Margaret tried to cut a deal, but the recordings were too damning. Darren pled guilty and cried like a child in court. I didn't attend any of the hearings. I had no more words for them. Instead, I returned to my life, slowly, carefully. I went back to the hospital after a few months of rest. My colleagues welcomed me with awkward warmth. None of them had believed the story until the footage aired. I didn't hold it against them. Evil hides well. And now, I could see it clearly. The guilt was gone. The burden gone. And Jill, once the center of my universe, was now just a file in a courtroom, a face I would never have to see again. They tried to end me. But I was the one who walked out. Alive. Free. And stronger than any of them ever imagined.